It's like, damn. It's like, boom, I don't really find out I get charged with murder until I get to Fulton County, because they never told me what I was charged with.
I got a song with Chief Keef called Who I Am.
That was Lil Tim, the man tied to the killing of King Von. He just dropped a video teasing a track with Chief Keef, and now OBlock and OTF are heated, calling Keef out for even being connected to Von's situation. Before we get into this chaos, make sure you hit subscribe, drop a like, comment your thoughts, and share this everywhere, because this story is getting serious fast. Now here's where it really kicks off. On February 13th, 2026, Mike Will Made It released a track that nobody in Chicago saw coming at all. He dropped Rooms featuring Chief Keef and NBA Youngboy on the same record, vibing together for the first time ever on Wax. Mike Will put both names front and center, then let it fly across Spotify and YouTube the same day, pulling in millions of streams instantly, no exaggeration. To the average rap fan, this looked legendary. Two major names finally linking up and sharing a beat. But if you really know what's going on behind the scenes, especially anyone connected to OBlock or rolling with OTF, this was not something to celebrate at all. This move stirred tension, raised eyebrows, and had people questioning loyalty in a big way. To understand why this hit so different, you have to go back to November 6th, 2020.
Okay, so you're in the hospital, you were shot yourself, and then you actually get arrested for the shooting?
Right, like a couple days later in the hospital, they come chain me to the bed.
That night, Davon Bennett, known as King Von, was killed outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge at 255 Trinity Avenue in downtown Atlanta. And everything changed after that. He was just 26 years old when everything went left. What started as a parking lot argument between two groups quickly exploded into a full-on shootout. Chaos everywhere, no warning.
They don't even tell me what I'm charged with. He just come in there, I see the handcuffs, I'm like, oh, I know what he finna do. He say something like, you're not charged. He said, you just detained right now.
6 people were hit and 3 didn't survive. King Von was one of them, and that moment shook everything. Timothy Leaks, known as Lul Timm, was there that night, moving with the opposing side. He was running with Quando Rondo's circle right in the middle of the tension. Shots rang out and even he got hit during the exchange. But he made it out alive while others didn't. While he was laid up in the hospital trying to recover, things got even more serious. Atlanta police showed up, walked straight in, and cuffed him to the bed like it was already over. At that point, he didn't even fully know what they had lined up against him, which made it even more intense. The very next day, November 7th, 2020, Atlanta PD hit Lul Timm with a felony murder charge tied to King Von's death and booked him into Fulton County Jail. That's when another layer came into play that people couldn't ignore. Lul Timm is known to be connected to 4KT, the Baton Rouge-based group tied to NBA Youngboy, the same artist Chief Keef just linked with in 2026. That connection right there turned Rooms from just a song into something way deeper, something people couldn't overlook. That track hit like a grenade the second it dropped. No warning, just straight impact. Whether Chief Keef meant it like that or not didn't even matter, because the moment it landed on streaming platforms, OBlock and OTF went off instantly. Comments started flooding in, reposts went wild, and every thread online was lit up with people reacting in real time. The main thing people kept saying was loud and clear: Chief Keef, someone who came up in the same Black Disciples environment as King Von, someone tied to the same history and streets as OBlock, just stepped into the studio and recorded a track with NBA Youngboy. And that hit different because of the deeper connections people couldn't ignore.
I got a song with Chief Keef called Who I can't play that bitch though.
No one from OBlock or OTF dropped an official statement right away, which made everything feel even more tense. Lil Durk, the head of OTF and one of Von's closest allies, had been dealing with legal issues since late 2024 and wasn't in a position to speak publicly, so the silence only made the online reactions louder. And then things escalated even more. A few weeks later, Lul Timm popped up on camera and started talking about how he's sitting on a track with Keef in the vault right now. He made it clear he can't release it, but he's holding on to it. Just imagine that. A piece of a song with Sosa locked away while people online are already heated. That's when it really clicked for a lot of people why OBlock and OTF saw this whole situation as crossing a line.
It's like, damn. It's like, boom, I don't really find out I get charged with murder until I get to Fulton County, because they never told me what I was charged with. So when I finally see my charge, I'm like, damn, they charging me for murder. Like, they don't say first degree, they don't say that, it just say murder.
To fully understand the reaction, you have to look closer at who Lul Timm is and how all these connections run deep. And here's where it gets serious, because the paperwork and background really start to explain why this situation hit so hard. Lul Timm, whose real name is Timothy Leaks, was born around 1998, and by his early 20s, he was already known as a member of 4KT, the Baton Rouge group connected to NBA YoungBoy. He wasn't just loosely around either. He was fully involved, moving with the crew, shouting out 4KT in his music, and representing the group openly in videos and public appearances before and after 2020. His strongest connection to Chicago isn't through music or industry drama. It traces back to that night everything went left. According to official reports, two groups encountered each other in the parking lot outside Monaco Hookah Lounge in downtown Atlanta around 3:20 in the morning on November 6, 2020. What started as a confrontation quickly turned physical, and then weapons were used, escalating the situation in seconds. 6 men were hit during the incident, and 2 lost their lives at the scene, including King Von and another man named Mark Blakely, who was also from Chicago. Reports also state that 2 off-duty Atlanta officers nearby responded during the chaos and discharged their weapons as the situation unfolded. Lul Timm was on the opposing side during that confrontation. He was struck by gunfire but survived. And while he was still receiving medical attention, investigators were already waiting outside, ready to question him as the case started building in real time.
And I get there, she tell me like, boom, boy, they didn't dismiss the case.
That felony murder charge hit heavy, especially in Georgia, where it's treated as extremely serious.
I'm like, damn, boy, God real. God that came through and dropped the case.
At his first court appearance, there wasn't even an option for bond, no number, nothing to work with. He was denied bond twice in Fulton County, making it clear the system wasn't playing around with this case at all. Then things shifted. Records show that on March 27, 2021, he was finally able to post a $100,000 surety bond and walk out, but not freely. He had an ankle monitor locked on, keeping him under strict watch. Even with that, the case didn't move quickly. It dragged on for over 2 years with no clear ending in sight. And then came the twist nobody expected. There was never a grand jury indictment filed. On August 20th, 2023, his attorney Noah Pines confirmed that the case against Timothy Leaks was officially dismissed before it ever even reached that stage. The DA's office chose not to move forward, meaning the murder charge was dropped completely, no trial, no conviction, just like that. When he found out, the reaction hit different. His mom reportedly called him over acting like something was wrong just to bring him home. And when it finally clicked, he spoke on it in a way that showed how real that moment felt for him. But even with all of that, none of it changed how OBlock and OTF viewed the situation. On the street side, the outcome in court didn't erase anything, and the tension stayed locked in place. Lul Timm was accused in that situation involving King Von, and later walked free, and that alone kept his name heavy in conversations. Now fast forward a few years, and he's not just loosely connected to Chief Keef through NBA YoungBoy, he's actually claiming he has a track with Keef sitting in the vault. That claim alone had people reacting crazy because it adds a whole new layer to everything that was already tense. But that's not the only time his name came up in legal trouble. Back in October 2022, while he was still out on bond, he was arrested again after a high-speed police chase in Georgia. That situation led to multiple charges related to drugs and traffic violations, stacking more pressure onto his record at the time. Those 2022 charges were still listed as pending when the earlier case was dismissed in 2023, and even after that, there haven't been clear public updates, no confirmed convictions, and no final outcomes tied to that incident showing up in official records through April 2026. Then the story takes an even heavier turn on the federal side. In October 2024, a federal indictment out of Los Angeles named 5 individuals with alleged ties to OTF, Kayvon London, DeAndre Grant, Dontrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Brian Lindsay, and Asa Houston. They were charged with serious offenses, including murder and murder for hire, connected to a 2022 retaliation plot involving Quando Rondo. According to reports, that situation led to the death of Quando Rondo's cousin, Xavier Robinson, at a Beverly Grove gas station in Los Angeles, turning the entire situation into something even bigger and more intense than people expected.
I be seeing folks them doing interviews and vlogs and all type of shit, so
yeah,
they might with it. They might with it. I don't know. Y'all gotta go to Front Street. Y'all gotta go to if that's the case. Y'all gotta go to all the block, all the sets. Y'all gotta go to Lemron, 300. Y'all gotta think about 300 too.
He didn't survive. And that moment added even more weight to an already intense situation. Prosecutors later alleged in Lil Durk's federal case that there was a plan targeting Quando Rondo, reportedly involving a large financial incentive, even including music opportunities, all tied back to what happened in 2020. That shows you just how serious and layered everything had become behind the scenes. That's the kind of pressure-filled environment Chief Keef stepped into when he linked up in the studio with NBA YoungBoy. This wasn't just music. This was a situation where the fallout from that 2020 Atlanta incident had already escalated into major federal cases, including allegations tied to murder for hire and racketeering involving people connected to OTF. At the same time, there were still unresolved legal questions surrounding key figures connected to that original situation, so tensions were already high from every angle. And right in the middle of all that, Keef dropped Rooms, which only amplified the reactions across the board. But to really understand why the backlash came in so strong, you have to go deeper than just recent events. This isn't only about what happened in 2020. It's built on years of history between Chief Keef's side and OBlock that goes way back before this current moment. The reaction from OBlock wasn't just emotional, it was tied to a long timeline of connections, conflicts, and complicated relationships that most people online don't fully see. And once you start looking at the actual history and details, the situation becomes way more complex than the simple story being pushed around. First thing that needs to be made clear, Chief Keef and OBlock are not the same set at all, not even close. Keef, whose real name is Keith Cozart, is tied to Lamron 300, a Black Disciples faction based out of Inglewood on Chicago's South Side. OBlock, on the other hand, comes out of Parkway Gardens, a completely different location with its own structure, its own rules, and its own internal politics. Yeah, both sides fall under the broader Black Disciples umbrella, and yeah, they share the same Southside roots, but that doesn't mean they move as one unit. These are two separate groups operating on different codes. And that distinction matters more than people think. Keef himself even explained it in a clip that started circulating again once the backlash picked up. He made it clear that 300 represents Lamron, his side, while OBlock is something entirely different, even if they exist under the same larger affiliation. That statement alone had people rethinking how connected these camps really are. And that separation is exactly what Lul Timm leaned on when he spoke out defending Keef during all the criticism. From his perspective, Keef wasn't crossing into anything because the sets don't operate as one. But here's where it gets even more complicated. The tension between Lamron/EE and OBlock isn't just talk. There have been real situations in the past that added friction between them. Back in 2014, there were reports involving individuals connected to OBlock, including someone associated with Boss Top, tied to an incident where they allegedly entered Chief Keef's suburban home without permission, adding another layer to an already tense history. According to police records, the situation got serious fast. The place was reportedly cleared out, with clothes, jewelry, and personal items taken, and at some point, gunfire broke out inside. Chicago PD responded, treated it as a robbery and aggravated battery case, and brought Chief Keef in for questioning as the victim. Footage from that investigation even leaked later, showing Keef sitting in a holding cell, waiting on his lawyer, which only made the situation look even more intense. And that wasn't the only incident tied to that time. In April 2014, another shooting hit a home connected to one of Keef's managers, and investigators started looking into whether the two Gutnai were linked in any way. Police identified a person of interest during that process, but no arrests tied to any publicly named OBlock affiliates showed up in court records from that period. Then there's the situation involving Lil Durk, which added another layer to everything. Back between 2013 and 2014, there was real tension between Durk and Keef's camps, and it wasn't just rumors floating online. In a 2015 BET interview, Durk openly spoke about the back and forth, even acknowledging that there were threats exchanged during that time. He also described a long FaceTime call, around 3 hours, where both sides finally talked things out, said what needed to be said, and recognized they came from the same environment. According to him, they agreed to move past it and leave the issues behind. Durk later explained that there was a lot going on back then, but by mid-2015, things had been settled and cleared up. No official police reports, no confirmed cases, and no court filings tied directly to that tension showed up in records between 2012 and 2015, which made it clear that a lot of what people believed was bigger than what was actually documented. In later interviews, Durk also shut down the idea that they were still in conflict, making it clear that whatever problems existed back then had already been handled and put to rest. All of that had already been settled years before Rooms ever dropped. But the second that track hit, the internet went digging and dragged everything back up like it just happened yesterday. People started flipping the narrative, trying to paint it like Keef was turning on his own, even though the history was way more complicated than that. What made it even crazier is that when actual OBlock connected voices spoke out in February 2026, some of them weren't attacking Keef at all. Instead, they were defending him. and they leaned heavily on what allegedly happened back in 2014 to make their point. Big Mike, who's been publicly linked to OBlock, went on Cam Capone News in mid-February 2026 and addressed everything directly. He brought up the reported mansion incident and claimed that people from OBlock had been taking advantage of Keef, mentioning situations involving money, support, and other favors. His argument was simple but loud. Keef didn't owe OBlock anything after all that history. Then another voice, 600 Unk, who's also connected to that circle, echoed the same message in a February 2026 interview. He made it clear that from his perspective, Keef had no obligation to stay tied into OBlock politics after what allegedly went down. That's what really flipped the conversation. You had people from that side using their own past issues with Keef as the reason why he could move how he wants now. It wasn't just outsiders talking anymore. It was voices from within the same environment adding fuel to the debate in a completely different way. And as all of this unfolded, a commentator closely connected to the Chicago scene broke everything down in a clip that went viral right alongside the backlash, pushing the conversation even further into the spotlight. The argument coming from voices inside OBlock's own circle sounded solid to a lot of people. The idea was simple. Keef made it out, got money, and then people around him allegedly started pressing him for it, asking for support, favors, and more. From that perspective, he stepped away and focused on his real family, leaving that environment behind. So the question being asked was loud and direct. What kind of loyalty is expected when someone feels like they were being taken advantage of in their own space? That backstory is a huge part of why Rooms hit the way it did. Because it's not just about music, it's tied into years of complicated history. Then things escalated even more. Once Keef responded publicly and Lul Timm started speaking up around the same time, the situation went to another level entirely. By mid-February 2026, the noise around Rooms had gotten so loud that it couldn't be ignored anymore. Keef stepped in and addressed everything himself through video statements in late February 2026, and then again publicly on March 7th, 2026. He responded to the criticism coming from OTF affiliates without calling out names or getting pulled into direct back-and-forth drama. Instead, he made his stance clear. He said he moves on his own terms, works with whoever he chooses, and doesn't follow anyone else's rules when it comes to his music career. That message was direct and unapologetic, and it sent a strong signal about where he stands. By that point, Keef had already been removed from the Chicago street environment for years, living in Los Angeles, building his career independently, and creating his own lane long before Rooms ever became part of the conversation. NBA Youngboy also spoke up around mid-February 2026, addressing the collaboration in a short clip. He kept it simple, showing respect for Chief Keef's music and making it clear he wasn't trying to get pulled into any debates about loyalty or alliances. He stayed in his lane and left it at that, which stood out considering how heated everything else was getting. But then Lul Timm stepped in, and that's when things really turned up. Across multiple video clips posted around the same time, he directly addressed OBlock and OTF as a whole, telling them to stop reacting so strongly over a song. He wasn't being subtle either. He was clearly speaking to the people who had been going off online since the track dropped. By February 16, 2026, outlets like Hot New Hip Hop picked up the story, and those clips spread fast across every platform, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, everywhere. The message he kept repeating was consistent. Chief Keef doesn't owe anyone anything, he made his success, and he has the freedom to work with whoever he chooses. But here's where it hit differently. Lul Timm being the one delivering that message didn't come across as neutral to OBlock and OTF supporters at all. To them, it added another layer of tension that was already there. From their point of view, this was someone connected to a painful past situation now speaking publicly, defending Keef's decisions, and calling out their reactions at the same time. That combination made his involvement feel personal to a lot of people watching. So when Lul Timm inserted himself into the conversation, it wasn't being taken as just commentary online. For many in those circles, it was seen as crossing a line, which only pushed the situation into an even more intense space. People weren't seeing it as harmless talk online, they were reading it as a direct jab across the internet. Lul Timm wasn't staying quiet and letting the Keef collaboration speak for itself. He was front and center on camera, making sure everyone saw it and felt it. Then in early April 2026, he added even more tension to the situation. He casually revealed in a clip that he had his own track with Chief Keef in the works, saying it straight up, "I got a song with Chief Keef." Though, that one line alone had people reacting instantly. DJ Academic's Threads account posted the clip on April 8, 2026, and right away, comment sections tied to OBlock circles started going off. The track has been referred to as Who I Am, although some reposts called it Who Hiding. but based on Lul Timm's own words in the original clip, the title is Who I Am. As of April 9th, 2026, the track hasn't dropped, no audio, nothing on streaming platforms, and no confirmation or denial from Chief Keef or GBE about whether it even exists. Everything about it is based solely on what Lul Timm has said publicly, but that alone was enough to push an already heated situation even further. And that reaction revealed something deeper that had been building for years. Ever since 2020, there's been a pattern in how these situations play out. And when you really line everything up, it starts to explain why the responses from OBlock and OTF have mostly stayed online instead of escalating into something official. When you look at the full timeline and all the details together, the picture becomes a lot clearer, and it shows exactly why things have played out the way they have up to this point. If you step back from all the noise online and really focus on what the official records show, the story looks very different from what people push on the internet. What it actually reveals is a situation where these groups were never as tightly connected as fans believed. And one single track ended up exposing tensions that had been sitting under the surface since 2014. And Chief Keef and OBlock do share roots through the Black disciples in Chicago's South Side. That part is real. But beyond that, they operate separately. Keef represents Lamron and GB. King Von was tied to OBlock and OTF, and Lul Timm is connected to 4KT out of Baton Rouge. That's 3 different groups, 3 different bases: Inglewood, Parkway Gardens, and Baton Rouge, all moving on their own terms. The links between them don't come from shared membership or any official alliance on record. They come from moments, incidents, and overlapping timelines that brought their names into the same conversations. The earliest documented tension between Keef's side and OBlock goes back to that 2014 mansion incident. Police responded, Keef was listed as the victim, and an investigation was opened. When it closed, no publicly named OBlock affiliates were charged in connection to it, but the situation itself was still very real and left an impact. That moment helped shape how Keef moved going forward. It created distance, and over time, that gap only grew wider. By the time King Von was rising in 2018 and 2019, Keef had already stepped away from Chicago for years, living in Los Angeles and focusing fully on his own path. At that point, OBlock politics weren't part of his day-to-day world anymore, and that separation is a key piece of why the reaction to Rooms played out the way it did. The situation between Durk and Keef had already been handled, and that's straight from Durk himself. He spoke on that FaceTime call, how they sat down, talked it out, and cleared the air as people who came from the same place. In interviews, he made it clear the internet was blowing things way out of proportion and pushing a narrative that didn't match what really happened. And when you actually check the official records, it backs him up completely. There are no police reports, no court filings, no documented physical issues between named members of their camps tied to that situation through April 2026. All that online talk was louder than the actual facts on paper. Now, when Lul Timm gets added into this, it starts to explain why OBlock and OTF never made anything official beyond the internet reactions. DJ Academics even reviewed surveillance footage from the 2020 Atlanta incident and pointed out how a self-defense angle could be argued from what was seen. He also broke down how Georgia law applies, showing that the case outcome didn't just happen randomly, it followed a legal path that was there from the beginning. That added a whole different layer for people trying to understand how everything played out. And then Lul Timm stood firm on his stance, openly saying he believed his actions were justified. That kind of talk hit hard and was taken as serious disrespect by people connected to OBlock and OTF. But regardless of how it's viewed emotionally, the legal outcome stands as it is. And when you look at everything together, it makes it clearer why the response from that side stayed online and never turned into something official on record. A big part of why nothing official came back from OBlock or OTF is because they've been dealing with their own serious legal pressure. Multiple individuals connected to OTF are facing federal charges tied to a 2022 murder-for-hire case connected to retaliation after King Von's death. On top of that, Lil Durk himself is in federal custody with an active case, which makes the whole situation even heavier. So when you look at OBlock and OTF in 2026, it's not just about music or online reactions. They're dealing with real legal battles, financial strain, and limitations on who can even speak publicly without making things worse. That kind of pressure changes how moves get made. And right in the middle of all that, Chief Keef stepped out and did what he wanted anyway. This is the same artist who helped shape the Chicago drill scene from the ground up, the one who opened doors that made careers like King Von's possible in the first place. And he still dropped a collaboration with NBA YoungBoy like it was nothing. Then he followed it up with his album Skeletor in April 2026. And nothing happened to him on a professional level. No label issues, no industry backlash, no reports of any real-world confrontation tied to the Rooms situation at all. His manager, Idris Dykes, even shut down rumors that Keef had been shot in Chicago back in January 2026. He made it clear Keef hadn't even been in the city for years, and there were no police reports or hospital records to support those claims. That just adds another layer to everything, showing that while the internet was going crazy, the reality on the ground looked very different. And when you really line everything up from start to finish, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. All the noise, all the reactions, all the back and forth online, none of it has translated into anything official beyond the internet. No new cases, no public confrontations, nothing on record that matches the level of outrage people were showing. What you're really looking at is a situation where perception is louder than reality. The history between these camps is real. The tension is real. But the way it plays out today is completely different from how people expect it to go. Social media turned it into a non-stop spectacle, but behind the scenes, everything is moving a lot more calculated. Chief Keef kept moving like none of it slowed him down. He stayed focused on his music, his business, and his own path, while everyone else was locked into debates and reactions. That separation, that distance he created years ago, is exactly what's protecting him now. At the same time, the other side is dealing with situations that go way beyond music, real legal pressure, real consequences, and real limitations. That changes everything about how responses happen and why certain lines never get crossed publicly. So in the end, Rooms didn't just spark a reaction, it exposed how deep the disconnect really is between what people think is happening and what's actually going on. And that gap right there is what keeps this whole situation sitting in the spotlight without ever fully boiling over. Here's what the full scoreboard really looks like when you break it all the way down. Chief Keef linked up on a track with NBA Youngboy. Youngboy is tied to 4KT. Lul Timm is also connected to 4KT. Lul Timm was charged in the situation involving King Von, and that charge ended up getting dropped. On top of that, Lul Timm is claiming he's sitting on an unreleased track with Keef himself, which only adds more heat to everything. Meanwhile, OBlock and OTF had something to say about all of it, calling Keef out and questioning the move, but Keef made his stance clear. He doesn't answer to anybody and moves how he wants. No permission needed. Then Lul Timm stepped in and told OBlock and OTF straight up to focus on getting money instead of arguing online, which pushed the tension even further into the spotlight. If you made it this far, make sure you hit subscribe, drop a like, leave a comment, and share this with someone who needs to see it, because this whole situation is still unfolding in real time.